The storm gathered like a predator circling its prey. By the time Jonathan Hale's car reached the iron gates of Ashwood Manor, the clouds had swallowed the moon, and rain hammered the windshield with relentless force. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, eyes straining to catch glimpses of the narrow road through the blur of water. The headlights cut only shallow tunnels of light into the forest, where ancient trees pressed close, their skeletal branches rattling in the wind like bones. Jonathan had not set foot near Ashwood Manor in 15 years. The letter that had summoned him lay unfolded on the passenger seat, its expensive parchment stained with a splash of rainwater. He had read it a dozen times during the journey, each word carved into his memory. Jonathan, you are requested to attend the reading of your late uncle's will at Ashwood Manor. Your presence is not optional. Midnight, October 12th. No greeting, no signature, no explanation. Only a date, a place, and a command that carried the weight of blood and memory. The gates loomed ahead, tall iron bars coiled with rust and ivy. For a moment, Jonathan thought they were locked, but as he approached, they shuddered and swung open with a groan that cut through the storm. He slowed the car, heart quickening. Who had opened them? He had seen no guardhouse, no lantern, no figure waiting in the dark. Yet the gates had yielded, as though the estate itself had been expecting him. The gravel drive stretched before him, winding uphill between hedges that rose like dark walls. With every turn, the manor revealed itself bit by bit, first the tall chimneys, then the stone facade streaked with centuries of rain, and finally the towering windows glowing faintly through the downpour. The light within seemed less like welcome and more like watchful eyes. Jonathan parked before the grand staircase and cut the engine. The storm's roar filled the silence. He stepped out, rain instantly soaking through his coat, and hurried up the steps where two massive oak doors awaited. Their carvings depicted hunts, battles, and angels whose faces had long eroded into something unreadable. The doors opened before he could knock. A tall woman in a black dress stood framed in the flickering glow of the hall behind her. Evelyn Ashwood, the family lawyer. Jonathan recognized her instantly, though she had aged into sharper lines and colder poise. Jonathan, she said, voice crisp, almost metallic. You came. He gave a curt nod. The letter was difficult to ignore. Her gaze flicked past him, scanning the empty driveway, then returned. Good. All heirs must be present before we begin. All heirs? Jonathan asked, stepping into the hall. The doors closed behind him with a sound like a coffin ceiling shut. Inside, the great hall exhaled the heavy scent of wood smoke and time. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, throwing restless shadows across portraits that lined the walls. Generations of Ashwood stared down with cold, judging eyes. Jonathan could feel the weight of their gaze, as though the family's dead demanded to witness this night as much as the living. By the fire, several figures turned to study him. Some he dimly recognized, cousins whose names blurred in his memory, faces changed by age but still carrying the same air of entitlement that had once driven him from this place. Others were strangers, bound by blood yet separated by loyalty. Their murmurs ceased the moment he entered, replaced by a silence heavy with suspicion. A man stepped forward, stocky and broad-shouldered, with a beard flecked by grey. Jonathan Hale, he said, his tone both mocking and curious. The prodigal returns. Marcus, Jonathan replied stiffly. His cousin's smirk hadn't changed since boyhood. Evelyn's voice cut through the tension. Enough. Save your theatrics for later. The will cannot be read until midnight, and until all heirs are present. Jonathan frowned. But everyone is here, aren't they? A pause stretched. The storm outside rumbled as if to fill the silence. No, Evelyn said at last, her eyes glinting in the firelight. Not everyone. There is still one missing, the heir who was presumed dead. Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus muttered a curse under his breath. A young woman near the fire clutched her shawl tighter, her pale face whitening further. Jonathan felt a chill colder than the storm seep into his bones. He searched Evelyn's face for a hint of jest, but her expression was iron. That's impossible, he said. You can't mean. Enough, Evelyn snapped. The matter will become clear in due time. Until then, you will wait. All of you. The thunder outside boomed as though the night itself had chosen to bear witness. Jonathan glanced once more at the portraits looming above. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him, unblinking, patient, and hungry for the secrets that would soon be unearthed. And in that moment, Jonathan knew whatever awaited them tonight would not merely divide the family. It would destroy it. Midnight approached like a predator stalking its prey. The storm had not eased. If anything, it had grown heavier, pounding against the tall windows of Ashwood Manor. The fire roared in the hearth, yet the chill inside the hall only deepened. Jonathan sat near the long oak table, his coat still damp from the journey. Around him gathered the scattered remains of the Ashwood family, faces drawn tight with greed, suspicion, or thinly veiled fear. The ticking of the grandfather clock at the end of the hall grew louder with every passing second, its hands inching toward 12:00 precisely midnight. Evelyn Ashwood rose. The lawyer's black dress shimmered in the firelight, her expression carved from stone. She carried a leather-bound folder, worn at the edges but heavy with authority. When she set it on the table, the crack of its weight echoed like a gunshot. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, "we are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Lord Ambrose Ashwood." The name alone was enough to stir the room. Some bowed their heads in grief, others smirked as if calculating what fortune might soon belong to them. Jonathan felt neither. His uncle Ambrose had been a man of iron discipline, sharp words, and a shadow that hung over everyone who crossed him. Love was not the word Jonathan would ever use for the man, but power. Yes, Ambrose had always held power. Even in death, that power lingered. Evelyn opened the folder and drew out the will. The parchment crackled as she unfolded it, the script written in Ambrose's unmistakable hand, precise, elegant, and cruel. "To my blood and heirs," she read, "I leave not merely wealth, but responsibility. Ashwood Manor has stood for centuries, and it shall not pass into careless hands. Each of you, by my decree, shall inherit nothing until a condition is met." Murmurs broke out. Marcus swore under his breath, and the young woman by the fire gasped. Evelyn raised her hand, silencing them. "The condition," she continued, "is a riddle, an inheritance test, if you will. The one who solves it shall hold claim to my fortune and my estate. The others shall receive nothing." Jonathan leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Ambrose had always loved games, but this was no ordinary jest. Evelyn read on. "In this house lies a secret buried deeper than gold, older than the blood that binds us. Find the room where light never dies, where silence speaks, and where the past waits to be unchained. Bring forth what is hidden, and the manor shall be yours." She lowered the parchment. The room erupted into chaos. "This is madness," Marcus roared. "A riddle? We came here for inheritance, not childish puzzles." "Childish?" Evelyn's voice cut through his anger like a blade. "Your uncle was never childish. He was deliberate. He wanted to test you, each of you. The terms are binding." The others muttered, some fearful, others hungry for the challenge. Jonathan sat back, his mind racing. A room where light never dies, where silence speaks, where the past waits to be unchained. It sounded less like a riddle and more like a curse. "Is that all?" Jonathan asked. "No," Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing. "Your uncle named all heirs, alive and otherwise. Until the missing heir arrives, the search cannot begin." The word struck Jonathan harder than the storm's thunder. "You can't mean—" "Yes," she said. "Adrian Ashwood." The name froze the room. Adrian, the cousin everyone had whispered about, the heir who had vanished 10 years ago under circumstances so dark that even Jonathan had never learned the truth. Officially, Adrian was dead. Unofficially, his body had never been found. Jonathan's chest tightened. Memories returned. Adrian laughing in the garden, reckless, defiant. Then the rumors of betrayal, of debts, of an escape into the night. Could he still be alive? The others reacted with fury. Marcus slammed his fist onto the table. "This is absurd. Adrian is gone, and we all know it. You can't bind us to a ghost." But Evelyn's tone remained unshaken. "The law binds you. Until Adrian appears, or is proven beyond doubt to be dead, the inheritance lies in limbo." Silence spread like poison. Only the fire crackled, only the storm howled. Jonathan felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, those portraits, those ancestors, watching from the walls. He did not know if they judged or mocked, but he felt certain of one thing: the night had only just begun, and in the depths of Ashwood Manor, beneath its stones and secrets, something was waiting to be found. The night deepened, and the storm showed no mercy. Rain lashed the tall windows of Ashwood Manor, and every crash of thunder rattled the chandeliers overhead. After the will's reading, the heirs dispersed uneasily into the shadowed corners of the hall, their whispers carried by the restless air like fragments of conspiracy. Jonathan remained by the fire, staring at the flames as if they might decode the riddle left behind by Ambrose Ashwood. A room where light never dies, where silence speaks, and where the past waits to be unchained. Each phrase gnawed at him, strange yet deliberate. His uncle had always loved layered meanings, his words carrying knives behind their elegance. Marcus broke the silence, his voice thick with contempt. This is nothing but Ambrose's final trick. He's laughing at us from the grave, I guarantee it. Perhaps, Jonathan replied, his eyes still fixed on the fire. Or perhaps he wanted to ensure his fortune went only to the one capable of understanding him. Marcus scoffed, poured himself a drink from the decanter on the sideboard, and muttered something Jonathan couldn't catch. Others had already begun to search the manor, some out of desperation, others with the thrill of a hunt. Jonathan rose. He had no interest in quarreling with cousins who measured their worth in gold and pride. If there was truth in Ambrose's words, it would not be found in idle arguments. He wandered into the corridor beyond the great hall. The sconces along the wall flickered weakly, shadows stretching into grotesque forms that twisted as he moved. The air was colder here, carrying a scent of damp stone and something older, as if the walls themselves remembered centuries of secrets. His footsteps echoed sharply. Silence speaks, he thought. The phrase gnawed at him again. What kind of silence could speak? The corridor led him toward the library, a vast chamber Jonathan remembered from childhood. Its towering shelves stretched to a vaulted ceiling, packed with volumes so ancient their spines had cracked and their titles faded. Dust clung to the air, disturbed only by the drafts that whistled through gaps in the stained glass windows. Jonathan traced a finger along one shelf, reading half-forgotten titles, histories of the manor, treatises on architecture, even obscure books on alchemy and philosophy. Ambrose had been a collector of knowledge, and perhaps of madness. In the center of the library stood a massive reading table. On it rested a single object, a candlestick, tall and ornate, its wax melted into strange patterns down its brass frame. The candle still burned, steady and unnaturally bright despite the drafts. Jonathan frowned. The flame did not waver, even when he exhaled close to it. A room where light never dies, the thought struck him like a chill. Was this the clue? Yet the library was hardly hidden, and Ambrose's riddle spoke of something deeper, more secretive. Jonathan circled the table, eyes scanning for anything unusual. That was when he noticed it, a book pulled slightly forward from the rest, as if inviting attention. Its cover bore no title, only a strange crest embossed in gold, a serpent coiled around a key. He reached for it, but before his hand touched the leather, a voice interrupted. Curious, isn't it? Jonathan turned sharply. Evelyn Ashwood stood in the doorway, her black dress blending with the shadows. Her expression was unreadable, though her eyes glinted with something sharp. You seem to know your way around, Jonathan said cautiously. I know this house better than most, she replied, stepping into the room. Lord Ambrose trusted me with certain matters. But the will's riddle, even I cannot decipher. Jonathan studied her. Evelyn was a woman who thrived on control, yet here she was, speaking of uncertainty. He didn't believe it. He gestured toward the book. Do you know this one? Evelyn's gaze flicked to the crest. A muscle in her jaw tightened. I've seen it before. Ambrose kept certain records locked away, records he said were not for the weak of heart. That symbol marked them. Jonathan pulled the book free. It was heavier than it looked. He set it on the table and opened it. Pages of cramped handwriting filled the volume, notes in Ambrose's precise hand. They spoke of hidden chambers beneath the manor, of passages sealed long ago, of debts and betrayals that reached beyond the family itself. But one line caught Jonathan's breath. The air shall find me where silence speaks loudest, where stone remembers what flesh forgets. He read it aloud. Evelyn's face paled slightly. That sounds like the crypt, she said in a whisper. Jonathan felt the room tilt colder. The Ashwood family crypt, he remembered it from childhood stories, a place beneath the manor where generations were entombed. He had never been allowed inside. Few had. It was said to be haunted not by spirits, but by secrets. Before Jonathan could speak, the library door slammed shut. The candle flickered for the first time, throwing wild shadows. Jonathan spun, scanning the room, but no one stood there. Only the echo of the slam remained, reverberating like a voice in the silence. Evelyn's composure cracked, her hand tightening on the edge of the table. Someone doesn't want us here. Jonathan closed the book, heart pounding. Then that means we're getting closer. For the first time that night, he felt not only fear, but certainty. His uncle's riddle was not meant to be solved from the safety of the hall. It would drag them into the depths of Ashwood Manor, into places where silence truly spoke, and where the past might not rest quietly. The slam of the library door still echoed in Jonathan's ears as he and Evelyn stepped cautiously into the corridor. The storm outside battered the windows with renewed fury, as though the house itself were trying to shake them loose. Jonathan clutched the serpent-marked book under his arm, its weight pressing against him like a secret that refused to stay hidden. They were halfway back to the great hall when voices carried through the corridor. Raised voices, sharp with anger. Jonathan quickened his pace, Evelyn close behind. When they entered the hall, they found Marcus at the center, his face red with fury. He had overturned a chair, and his hand gripped the neck of a bottle he looked ready to smash. Several cousins stood in a tight knot nearby, whispering with thinly veiled hostility, "You're all blind." Marcus thundered, "This riddle is a trick, nothing more. Evelyn feeds us lies, and Jonathan here," his finger jabbed through the air at Jonathan, "thinks he's cleverer than the rest. Don't trust him. He'll take everything if you let him." Jonathan met his cousin's glare evenly. "I'm not here to play games, Marcus. If you want to waste your night shouting, that's your choice. But I've already found the first clue." A ripple of tension spread through the room. "What clue?" demanded one of the women, her eyes narrowing. Jonathan placed the book on the table. The serpent and key gleamed in the firelight. Ambrose left records, detailed notes. He mentioned the crypt beneath the manor. The silence that followed was almost physical. Several heirs exchanged nervous looks. Even Marcus's bravado faltered for a moment. "The crypt is sealed," one cousin muttered. "It has been for decades." "Sealed doesn't mean unreachable," Jonathan replied. "And if Ambrose hid his secret anywhere, it would be there." Marcus's laughter broke the tension. "Harsh, ugly. So you'd lead us into tombs and shadows chasing fairy tales? Perhaps you'd like to dig up our ancestors, too. Convenient, isn't it?" The prodigal son returns just in time to discover a conveniently placed book. Jonathan stepped forward, fists clenched, but Evelyn raised a hand between them. Her voice sliced through the hall. "Enough! The will is clear. If you wish to inherit, you must face what Ambrose left behind. Whether that path leads to the crypt or not, none of you can ignore it." The fire flared suddenly, sending sparks up the chimney. For a heartbeat, the portraits on the wall seemed alive, their painted eyes glimmering in the light. Jonathan felt again the weight of unseen judgment. A crash from the far end of the hall shattered the silence. The tall window near the staircase had burst open, wind and rain howling inside. Curtains whipped like sails. One of the women screamed. Jonathan and Marcus rushed forward, but the corridor beyond was empty. Only footprints in the wet floorboards suggested someone had been there and had fled. "An intruder," Evelyn breathed, "or Adrian." Jonathan whispered the name, sent another ripple through the gathered airs. If Adrian truly lived, perhaps he was already here, stalking them in the storm, watching from the shadows. Marcus cursed. "We're wasting time. Whoever it is, they'll kill us in our sleep if we don't get ahead of this. I say we break the crypt open tonight." Fear and greed wrestled across the faces in the room. Some nodded eagerly, desperate for answers. Others recoiled at the thought of entering the family tombs. Jonathan studied them all, unease growing. If Adrian was alive, then suspicion fell on everyone. Evelyn's gaze lingered on Jonathan. "The decision isn't yours alone, Marcus. But perhaps the crypt is where we must go." The storm roared louder. As if in agreement, Jonathan tightened his coat, his mind replaying the riddle: light that never dies, silence that speaks, the past unchained. The pieces were aligning, but not yet enough. The crypt was only the beginning. He could feel it. The heirs argued. Jonathan turned once more toward the window. The footprints leading into darkness had already begun to fade under the rain. Whoever had entered Ashwood Manor that night had vanished again, but their presence lingered, a ghost among the living, and somewhere in the shadows, Jonathan knew, the game his uncle had begun was drawing tighter, its claws closing around them all. The debate over the crypt had barely settled when the manor's great doors groaned open again. A gust of wind tore through the hall, scattering papers, dimming the fire, and making the chandeliers rattle like bones. Every heir turned at once, their arguments dying in their throats. A man stood framed in the doorway. Rain dripped from his coat, his boots, his hair that clung to his forehead. His eyes, sharp and grey, swept across the room with unsettling calm. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Evelyn whispered the name everyone else dared not speak, Adrian. The hall erupted in gasps. Some recoiled, crossing themselves as if to ward off a ghost. Marcus cursed, his face draining of colour before twisting into rage. Jonathan, however, simply froze. The cousin he had once known stood there alive, solid, undeniable. Adrian Ashwood stepped inside. The storm slammed the doors shut behind him with finality, as though the house itself had swallowed him. His presence carried the weight of years and secrets, and yet he walked with deliberate ease, as if returning to a home he had never truly left. "I see you started without me," Adrian said, his voice low but carrying. It was the same voice Jonathan remembered, only deeper, sharpened by time and something darker. Marcus lunged forward. "You're supposed to be dead." Adrian's smirk was cold. "Disappointed to see me alive, cousin?" Evelyn moved between them, her composure faltering for the first time. "Adrian Ashwood, by law and blood, you are an heir to Lord Ambrose's estate. You were presumed dead, yet here you stand. Do you have proof of your identity?" Adrian's gaze cut to her like a blade. "Proof?" He pulled back his sleeve, revealing a scar that ran jagged from wrist to elbow. "Ambrose gave me this when I was 15. Said it would remind me of disobedience. No one else could know that." Evelyn swallowed but did not argue. Jonathan finally found his voice. "Where have you been all these years?" Adrian's eyes locked onto his. For an instant, something flickered there, pain, maybe guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Far from here. Long enough to learn that Ashwood blood is both a curse and a weapon." The room buzzed with whispers. Some stared at Adrian as if he were a savior, others as if he were the devil himself. Marcus wasn't finished. "You don't belong here," Marcus spat. "You forfeited your place the night you ran. You'll not steal what's mine." "Yours?" Adrian said softly, dangerously. "Ambrose left us a game, not a gift. And I intend to win." The weight of his words silenced Marcus. Jonathan studied his cousin closely. Adrian's return was no accident. He had chosen this night, this storm, this moment. And Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian knew more about the riddle than he let on. Evelyn regained her control and addressed the heirs. "By Ambrose's decree, all heirs are now present. The conditions of the will stand. The search begins." The storm thundered in response, shaking the manor's ancient walls. Jonathan's mind raced. With Adrian alive, the balance of power had shifted. Secrets buried in the crypt might reveal not only Ambrose's intentions but also where Adrian had been, and why he had returned now. For the first time since entering Ashwood Manor, Jonathan felt the air tighten around him, as if the house itself had drawn a sharp breath. The game had truly begun. The storm raged on, drumming against the windows as if demanding entry. Inside Ashwood Manor, the tension had grown sharper than the wind's howl. Adrian's sudden return had shifted the balance of power in ways Jonathan could not yet grasp. Every glance, every word exchanged among the heirs now carried an extra weight, sharpened by suspicion. Evelyn declared the search officially open, but before anyone could scatter into the depths of the manor, Marcus slammed his fist onto the table. "No," he barked. "We do this together. I won't have Adrian slithering off into the shadows with Jonathan, concocting some scheme to claim everything." Adrian gave a slow, mocking smile. "Still afraid of the dark, Marcus? Even with a room full of witnesses?" Marcus's face reddened, and for a moment Jonathan thought he might attack. But instead, his cousin poured himself another glass of brandy and muttered something venomous under his breath. The group decided, reluctantly, that they would search in pairs. Evelyn, with her lawyer's authority, insisted on documenting every discovery. Jonathan found himself partnered, ironically, with Adrian. The cousins exchanged a wary glance before setting off toward the western wing of the manor, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hallways. The silence between them was heavy at first, broken only by the groan of the old house in the storm. Finally, Jonathan spoke. "Where were you all these years, Adrian? Why now? Why tonight?" Adrian's jaw tightened. Do you think I chose this night? Ambrose chose it. He wrote his riddle knowing I'd return. That doesn't answer my question. No, Adrian said after a pause. And it won't. Not yet. Jonathan bristled, but he saw the fire in Adrian's eyes, something unresolved, something dangerous. His cousin wasn't ready to tell the whole truth, but Jonathan sensed it would surface soon. Whether Adrian wished it or not, they turned a corner and found themselves in a gallery lined with portraits. Dust clung thickly to the frames, but one portrait was different. It had been recently cleaned. Jonathan stepped closer. It was Ambrose, painted in his prime, eyes fierce, lips curled in that familiar half-smile that always hinted at some private cruelty. Beneath the portrait was a plaque. Jonathan wiped away dust to reveal the inscription, "He who forgets the past is doomed to repeat it." The words sent a chill through him. The past waits to be unchained. Before he could voice the thought, Adrian muttered, "Ambrose always liked reminding us of our sins. He collected them like trophies." Jonathan turned, frowning. "What do you mean?" Adrian's expression darkened. "You think this family is just greedy? You don't know half of it. Debts, betrayals, affairs, Ambrose knew everything. He used it like a leash. You'll see." They moved on, but Jonathan's unease only deepened. If Adrian was right, the manor was less an inheritance and more a trap, a prison built from secrets. Meanwhile, back in the great hall, tensions boiled over. Marcus had cornered Evelyn by the fire. His voice was low, but Jonathan, returning with Adrian, caught fragments of it. "Can't let him take it. You know what's at stake. Help me, and I'll make sure you're rewarded." Evelyn's reply was colder than the storm outside. "You overestimate your power, Marcus, and underestimate mine." Jonathan realized then that Evelyn was not simply an impartial executor. She had her own stakes in this game, though what they were remained hidden. As the heirs regrouped, one of the younger cousins, Clara, burst into the hall, her face pale as moonlight. "Come quickly! In the east wing, I found something." They followed her through twisting corridors until she stopped before a locked door. The wood was splintered, as though someone had tried to break it down. Clara's hand shook as she pointed. "I heard noises. Scraping, like something moving inside." Adrian stepped forward, testing the handle. It gave way with a groan, and the door swung open. The room beyond was small, filled with dust and cobwebs. At first glance it was empty, but on the floor lay a journal, its leather cover torn. Adrian picked it up and flipped through the pages. Jonathan leaned over his shoulder. The journal contained letters, love letters, written in Ambrose's hand. But they were not to his late wife. They were to someone else. A servant, perhaps, or a stranger. The words were intimate, passionate, and damning. Marcus snatched the journal, scanning the lines. His face twisted with triumph. "So this is the great Ambrose, hypocrite, adulterer. If this gets out, the Ashwood name will be ruined." "Ruined?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Or liberated. Secrets cut both ways. Marcus, be careful which blade you wield." Jonathan felt the atmosphere shift again. Every discovery pulled the family further apart. Trust was crumbling, suspicion festering. And in that moment, as lightning split the sky outside, a scream tore through the manor. They all froze. The scream came from upstairs. Adrian was the first to move, bolting for the staircase. Jonathan followed, his heart pounding. They reached the landing and found one of the cousins, Henry, collapsed on the floor. His throat was marked with dark bruises, his eyes wide with terror though no sound escaped him now. He was dead. The hall filled with chaos. Shouts, accusations, panic. Marcus roared that Adrian must have done it. Clara wept. Evelyn barked for order, but her voice was nearly drowned out by the storm and the hysteria. Jonathan knelt by Henry's body. The bruises were shaped like fingers, strong fingers. Whoever had killed him had done so with their bare hands. And recently, the killer could still be among them. Watching Adrian crouch beside Jonathan, his face unreadable. "Now it begins," he said softly. Jonathan met his cousin's gaze. For the first time, he wondered if Adrian had spoken the truth earlier, that Ambrose had known he would return, and that all of this, the riddle, the inheritance, the blood, was only the start of something far darker. The scream that marked Henry's death still echoed through Ashwood Manor long after his body had been carried to the drawing room. The family was in chaos, accusations flying, fear curdling into paranoia. Yet Evelyn insisted the search must continue. Ambrose's riddle demanded it, and now, with blood spilled, it seemed impossible to turn back. Jonathan, Adrian, Marcus, Clara, and Evelyn descended together into the lower halls, the serpent-marked book guiding their way. Lanterns flickered in their hands, the flames trembling with every gust of cold air that seeped from cracks in the stone. The air grew heavier as they neared the steps that spiraled into the crypt below. The door to the crypt was iron-bound, its lock ancient. Adrian ran his fingers over the carvings etched into the metal, symbols of serpents, keys, and eyes that seemed to follow their every move. This was Ambrose's obsession, Adrian murmured. Not just wealth, not just power. He wanted control over memory itself. Evelyn produced a key, rusted but intact. Ambrose left this with me years ago. He said I would know when to use it. The lock groaned as it turned, and the door opened with a shriek that seemed to bleed into the storm above. The heir stepped inside. The crypt was vast, lined with stone coffins resting in alcoves. Dust coated every surface, but the air was not still. It carried whispers, faint yet unmistakable, like breath moving through hollow throats. Clara clutched Jonathan's arm, trembling. In the center of the crypt stood a stone pedestal. Upon it rested another book, this one bound in dark leather, its cover etched with the same serpent and key crest. A single candle burned beside it, though no one had lit it. Adrian approached first. A room where light never dies, he whispered. Jonathan nodded. And silence speaks. Evelyn urged caution, but Adrian ignored her. He opened the book, and the candle's flame leapt higher as if feeding on his touch. The pages revealed Ambrose's final confessions, accounts of betrayals, debts, blackmail. Every family member in the hall had their sins catalogued within. Jonathan read over Adrian's shoulder. His own name appeared, tied to an incident from his youth that Ambrose had never confronted him about. Shame surged in his chest, but deeper than that was fury. Ambrose had never intended to reward them. He had intended to control them, even from the grave. Suddenly Marcus lunged forward, seizing the book. This proves it, he shouted. Ambrose was a tyrant, and this so-called inheritance is nothing but chains. But if I hold the book, I hold the power. Jonathan tried to intervene, but Marcus shoved him aside. The cousins struggled, their voices echoing through the crypt. In the chaos, the lantern Clara held slipped and shattered, flames licking across the floor. Smoke curled upward, feeding on centuries of dust and rot. Enough. Evelyn's voice cut through the madness. She snatched the book from Marcus with surprising strength. Her eyes glowed in the candlelight, and for the first time Jonathan saw something terrifying there. Not just control, but hunger. You fools, she hissed. Do you think Ambrose trusted any of you? He trusted me. I have kept his secrets for decades, and now his legacy is mine to wield. Clara gasped. You? But Evelyn wasn't finished. She lifted the book high. Ambrose left clues for you, yes. But the true heir was always meant to be the one who understood him, who shared his mind. That was me. The crypt shook as thunder roared overhead. The candle flared again, almost blindingly. Jonathan's chest tightened with the realization Evelyn had orchestrated everything. Adrian's return, Marcus's outbursts, even Henry's death, it had all served her plan. You killed Henry, Jonathan said, his voice low. Evelyn smiled, cold and sharp. He was weak. He doubted too much. And Ambrose despised weakness. Marcus lunged at her, but Adrian intercepted him. For the first time, Jonathan saw fire in his cousin's eyes, not cold arrogance, but resolve. She's not getting away with this, Adrian growled. Together, Jonathan and Adrian advanced. Evelyn backed toward the pedestal, clutching the book. The candle's unnatural flame cast monstrous shadows on the walls. You don't understand, she cried. This isn't just inheritance, it's knowledge that could reshape everything. Ambrose discovered truths buried in this manor that go beyond us, beyond family. He left them for me. But Jonathan saw only madness. He lunged, grappling with her. The book slipped from her grasp, skidding across the floor toward Adrian. Evelyn shrieked and clawed at Jonathan, but Adrian snatched the book and held it aloft. The candle's flame sputtered. The whispers in the crypt grew louder, almost deafening. Jonathan shoved Evelyn back. She stumbled, striking her head against the stone pedestal, and collapsed. Adrian stared at the book, his face pale. "It's all here," he whispered. "Every secret, every betrayal, Ambrose's final design." Jonathan approached cautiously. "Then we end it. Burn it." Adrian hesitated. His eyes flicked between Jonathan and the book, torn between temptation and loyalty. For a moment, Jonathan feared his cousin would choose ambition. But then Adrian nodded, resolute. He hurled the book into the flames still smoldering from the shattered lantern. The fire roared, consuming the leather and parchment. The candle extinguished itself in a hiss of smoke. The whispers ceased. Silence fell, deep and absolute. Jonathan stood gasping in the dark, the only light now their flickering lanterns. Evelyn lay unconscious at the pedestal, Marcus glaring at her with a mixture of rage and relief. Clara clung to Jonathan's arm, trembling. At last, Adrian spoke. "Ambrose's game is over." Jonathan wasn't so sure. The crypt lay in silence after the fire consumed Ambrose's final book. The storm above had softened into a steady rain, as if the heavens themselves had exhaled in relief. Yet inside the manor, the silence was heavy, thick with the weight of what had been revealed and destroyed. Jonathan helped Clara up the stairs, her steps unsteady. Marcus followed, muttering curses under his breath, casting venomous looks at Evelyn, who was being half carried by Adrian. Her eyes fluttered open as they reached the hall, but the fight had left her. The iron grip she had once held over the family's secrets was gone, burned away with the book. By dawn, the fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers. The heirs gathered one final time in the great hall, exhaustion etched into every face. Evelyn sat apart, her head bandaged, her composure shattered. For once, she looked less like a lawyer and more like a defeated conspirator. Jonathan stood before them all. Ambrose's legacy is finished. The book is gone, and with it, his control. Whatever inheritance he imagined, it has no power now. Marcus snarled. "Easy for you to say. We came for gold, for land. What do we have to show for it? A corpse upstairs and ashes in the crypt." Adrian's voice cut through the bitterness. "We have freedom. For once, no one is holding Ambrose's whip over us. Isn't that worth more than gold?" Some nodded reluctantly. Others looked away, unable to let go of greed. Clara, though, whispered softly, "He's right. We don't need Ambrose's curse." Evelyn stirred then, her voice hoarse. "You think it's over? You've burned one book, but Ambrose's secrets were not confined to a single volume. There are more, hidden deeper, and when they surface, you'll wish you had kept me at your side." Jonathan's gaze hardened. "Perhaps, but they won't surface with you holding them hostage. You'll face the law for Henry's death. Whatever else Ambrose hid, it will no longer poison this family." For the first time, Evelyn looked uncertain. Her mask had cracked beyond repair. She lowered her head and said nothing more. As the storm clouds broke and pale sunlight filtered through the manor's tall windows, Jonathan felt a strange peace. The house still stood heavy with shadows, but its grip had loosened. Ambrose's voice, once echoing through every corridor, was finally silent. Later, as the others departed, Adrian lingered by the grand staircase. Jonathan approached, uncertain. "So what now?" Jonathan asked. Adrian's smile was faint, almost weary. "Now? We live. Perhaps for the first time in our lives, we live without Ambrose defining us." He paused, his grey eyes steady. "But remember this, burning one book doesn't erase the truth. Ambrose left stains on this family that will never wash out. We'll carry them, whether we want to or not." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Maybe, but we can choose what we become after him." For the first time, his cousin extended a hand. Jonathan took it. Their grip was firm, tentative, but real. Whatever had divided them for years, whatever shadows lingered, something new had begun, an alliance not of ambition, but survival. As Jonathan left Ashwood Manor, he turned back once. The rain-slicked stone walls glistened in the dawn. The portraits of ancestors still lined the great hall, but their painted eyes no longer felt as heavy. Perhaps, he thought, the past had finally been unchained, and as the gates closed behind him, Jonathan felt the storm's last drops fade into silence. The vanishing heir had returned, but it was the ghosts of the living, and the secrets of the dead, that had truly vanished into history. Ashwood Manor remained, a monument of stone and secrets, but no longer a prison. For the first time in decades, the future belonged not to Ambrose, not to Evelyn, but to those who had survived the night.